Wow. Are we ever living in interesting times, holy times, times of connecting, not times of abandonment, but times of validation and times of being and feeling Hashem's closeness. Over Simchat Torah, I heard, again for the umpteenth time, a nigun which you may or may not know, but the words are remarkable, and it really sums up our need to, the response that we need to make and what's going on. The words are from our great sages, Echad Yachid Im Yuchad, Haya Hove V'yeh. That's it. He is one, single, and unified. Haya, he was. Hove, he is. V'yeh, he will be. And the great Rebbe, Rabbi Mordechai of Devorah, made the following melody to it. Echad Yachid Im Yuchad, Haya Hoya V'yeh. Echad Yachid Im Yichad, Haya Hoya V'yeh. Echad Yachid Im Yichad, Haya Hoya V'yeh. Echad Yachid Im Yichad, Haya Hoya V'yeh. It goes on. It's a beautiful nigun. It's a very devekistic nigun. And we need to be Dovek to Hashem. We've spoken about this many, many times since lesson number 1. This is, I think, the 17th. The need for us to make yichudim, for us to bring Hashem into our bodies, into our surroundings, and into our worlds. When Hashem is not part of our worlds, then there is a vacuum. And the vacuum invariably is filled in by bacteria, by impurity, by infection, by tumah. So we have to make sure that we're constantly connected so that we don't create these vacuums. And that's what making a yichud is all about, says the Baal Shem Tov. I'm going to be speaking today to myself. And if you listen in, I'm happy to share with you. But I'm not telling anyone what they need to do. I'm not giving anyone musar. I'm not giving anyone scolding or it's because of this or that events have happened. But I will tell you that we all need to look within and make changes. Hashem is talking to us, this Echad Yachid Im Yuchad, Haya Hoya V'yeh. So please forgive me if my words seem to be speaking to you, but they're not. I'm only speaking to myself. Our last lesson in Tomer Devorah was on the 10th of the 13 higher attributes of mercy, Titen Emes Liakov. And if you recall, the Holy Tomer Devorah tells us that there are Jews who aren't exceptional. They're not bad. They're just very linear, very simple, very black and white. And he calls them Beinonim, average people, as opposed to what the Baal Tanya calls Beinonim according to Rav in the Gemara. But that's not our discussion here. But there are Jews who live a simple life, do their best, expect themselves to do what's expected of them, don't do any more, don't do any less, And their attribute par excellence is emes. The most important thing for them is to be truthful, is to be straight, is to be honest, and they expect that they'll be treated in like in return. And we need to treat everyone with honesty and integrity so that, chas v'sholem, we don't create a void. A void is a chil Hashem. A void is where we have disassembled, as it were, HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah. Instead of making a yichud, we've made a separation. When someone says or does something which causes a simple person to exclaim that this is terrible, this is the way a religious Jew is supposed to act, no. I don't want to be part of this. That's the worst chil Hashem there could be. So we need to treat all people with that very good, very beautiful quality of emes. But today we're going to learn something else which is a little bit higher. Something which is very, very powerful. And really is what we should all aspire to make ourselves part of. And that's the idea of the 11th attribute, 11th higher midah of Hashem's great Rachmanus, Chesed Avraham. And it's remarkable how it ties in to everything that's been happening in our world for the last 4 days. If you look at the very last verse in this week's Parsha being this week's, the week that we're in now. Breshit, right? And most people talk about the creation of the world and the creation of Adam and Chava and Gan Eden and the expelling of Adam and Chava from Gan Eden, and even about Adam and Chava's children, Cain, Hevel, and Chesed. But I'm going to take you on a tour to the very last pasuk in the Parsha. And who does it speak about? Noah. There is a remarkable midrash on that very last verse in the Parsha. The verse says, Unoach matza chen be'enei Hashem. And Noach found favor in the eyes of Hashem. Sounds like a compliment, right? The Medrash says the following comment which will blow you away. Noach matza chen. Noach found favor. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo matza chen. Hashem was not happy with Noach. He didn't find, we think of the idea of finding favor as meaning liking. But finding favor doesn't mean liking. Finding favor means looking for something and finding it. What was that quality of Noach that really ties into that previous midah that we talked about last week and I referred to previously? The Torah continues in Parshas Noach and says, These are the generations of Noach. Noach was tzaddik and tamim b'dorosav. He was righteous, tzaddik, tamim, pure in his generations. The Mefarshim tell us that tzaddik is referring to a specific generation, and tamim is referring to a specific generation. In which generation was Noach a tzaddik? In the generation that preceded the flood. And interestingly, here's our first allusion to the events going on with us today. Noach saw the world. Noach heard Hashem say that in such and such a time I'm going to bring a marvel to the world. And the world was filled with Hamas, violence. And violence and Hamas led to destruction. What was Noah's reaction? Nothing. Hashem said, build a teva, and he did it. Didn't deviate, took his time, didn't say a word. Later, Noah comes out of the teva, and with his sons and their wives, and humanity starts all over again. And people, the Torah tells us, settled in the land of the east. And there they decided that they wanted to make a name for themselves. What was the common denominator of all of those people in that generation that built the Tower of Babel? Haflaga.
One language.
One language, good. What else?
One desire.
One desire, also what else? Unification. They were all on the same page. They all loved each other. Noach saw it, and he said nothing. He was tamim, quiet, still. Hashem didn't like that. Hashem expects us to be more than just simply straight, linear, black and white. Hashem wants us to react, not to change other people, but to change ourselves. And when we change ourselves, we can change the world. Because we're essentially acknowledging that Hashem is Echad, Yachid, and Yichad. Hashem is my creator and my father. And if I make an effort towards him, if I make an isarusa de lasata, de la'el, I should say, if I make an effort to reach upward to Hashem, Hashem will respond in like. And that's what he did with Avraham Avinu. Noach didn't find favor in Hashem's eyes because Noach didn't make any effort to reach out. He just followed instructions like a good soldier. And that's why in the Chassidish circles, when they teach Parshas Noach to small children, they call Noach a tzaddik in pelts. What does pelts mean in Yiddish? It means a winter coat. He was a tzaddik who was in a cold room, and instead of turning on the heat as Avraham Avinu would have done and did, to warm up the world with Hashem's tremendous light and warmth, he put on a coat. That's not what pleases Hashem. Now, let's learn this next midah, and then we're going to go into some very interesting and amazing tangents relative to events and relative to this midah. I'm sorry that I didn't send any materials or printed materials because right now we've moved out of our home. We're not ready to go into our new home, and so we're on the journey to Eretz Yisrael. We're out of Mitzrayim, we're not in Eretz Yisrael. So I don't have any copy materials, I don't have anything. Hashem, I just have Hashem and I have you all. Okay. So the 11th of the midos that are brought down in the Navi Micha is Chesed la'Avraham. And the Tomer Devorah explains as follows. Hey misna'agim ba'oilem lifnim meshuras hadin. These people that we're going to be talking about, these people who are the personifications of Chesed leAvraham, they operate within this mahalach, this behavior of what's called Lifnim meshuras hadin, which we'll define in a couple of minutes. Ka'Avram Avinu, just like Avraham. V'gam HaKadosh Baruch Hu misnag imohem Lifnim meshuras hadin. And so too, as we said, whatever we do down below, Hashem will do for us. And so too, if I'm kind to people, Hashem will be kind to me. Ve'eno ma mirimam din al tokfo. And if I'm in a position to judge someone, I'm not going to give a harsh judgment. V'af loy b'derech hayosher. And even more than the straight arrows of Titin Lam Yaakov, the last one, I'm not even going to say, well, sorry, you came late, you can't come in. I'm going to bend things a little bit. I'm going to be kind. Ela nichna simon lifnim meshuras hadin. But he brings them in. Mina yosher kamoy shehem isnagim. Just like someone who is kind will go out of their way for someone else, so too we have to, and so too Hashem will with us. Tahainu chesed leAvraham, HaKadosh Baruch Hu misnag b'midas chesed im oisam shehem kamoy Avraham k'mid ha'hagasum. And so too Hashem will act in this wonderful way of being kind and soft and unselfish and giving and more, just like Avraham Avinu did. V'gam ha'adam, and not just theoretically, but for each and every one of us. Im hayois she'im kol adam yimisnaig b'tzedek v'yosher v'mishpat. If a person will act in a way of righteousness and straightness and justice, that's for other people. But people who are extra kind, he'll be extra sensitive and extra responsive. He'll be straight and he'll be honest and he'll be reliable. But he'll also be kind and he'll act Lifnim meshuras hadin, as we'll discuss. And those people who only want to deal straight, he'll be patient with them a little bit. But the people who are kind more and more. I'll never forget that we all have our strengths. I have a lot of weakness and I have a lot of flaws, believe me. I remember for years and years, when my late wife was sick, we lived down the alley from the shul. And I would always bring her to shul for Parshas Zohar, for Yizkor, for special times, because it involved climbing upstairs, and it was very hard for her to walk. And Balabatim would come up to me and say, "Wow, you're such a tzaddik." I said, "No. This is very easy for me to do. Other things are very hard." So we have to recognize that if somebody to do acts of kindness are not hard for a lot of people. And those people you need to be extra kind to. That's the lesson of Chesed leAvraham. V'yirachem aleim l'kanes imam lifnim meshuras hadin. And you should bring them in by this method of lifnei meshuras hadin. Shehu misnaig bo im shar adam. Every person you have to act kind, but as you said before, those people who are extra kind, go out of your way for them. And those people who are kind, be extra loving and giving to them. You have to view them as if they're the most important people in your life. They're beloved to you. And the people that are in your group, your friends, your acquaintances, your colleagues, you should choose to have those people as your friends. And that is Midah Chadesrei. That's the 11th Midah. Now, before we go on and explain what we just read about and how it applies to us and how it applies to today's events, remarkable events. Next week, Emir Hashem, if the Mashiach hasn't come and we're still here, we'll learn the last two of the attributes of Tomer Devorah. The 12th is Aser Nishbata Lavosenu, that Hashem promised that He would never let us down, that He would always show kindness and mercy to us, even if we're not worthy of it, because there had to have been someone in our family who was worthy of it. And the 13th is Mimei Kedem. And even if there's nobody in our lives who's kind and who deserves Hashem's kindness, there had to have been somebody who preceded us, an ancestor who, that in itself elicits this attribute of kindness. And with that, we will finish Chelik Aleph, Perek Aleph, the first part of Tomer Devorah. And if the time works according to our schedule, we'll start the next term, Perek Beis. Okay. So now let's talk about what I just talked about. I thought I could let you get away so fast. What does this mean? Chesed la'Avraham. What is chesed? What words do we have in our vocabulary, in everyday vocabulary, which is a derivative of the word chesed? Who can tell me what term is used quite frequently and is a derivative of chesed? And I'll give you a hint.
Chassidut.
That's right. Chassidut. We think of chassidut or chassidus as being those who are extremely pious, those who dress differently, those who act differently, those who keep themselves apart, they live in different places. And that, my dear friends, is the most superficial aspect of what Chassidus is. Throughout our Chazal, the question is asked, Ezehu Chassid? What is a Chassid? And I found 5 answers. And the truth is, I'm reminded in 1962, hearing President Kennedy speaking at the Berlin Wall in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis and telling the people of West Berlin, Ich bin ein Berliner. We are all Berliners. My friends, we are all chassidim, no matter how we dress, no matter how we act. To be a Jew is by definition to be a chassid. Because what makes a chassid? The answer to the question I just asked before. The question is, Ezu chassid? And the first answer is one who acts Lifnim meshuras hadin. Someone who goes above and beyond the call of duty. My dear Chaver, Rav Shlomo, spoke about what we all need to do now. That Hashem was speaking to us on Shabbos morning. He was talking to us, and he was telling us that we need to do something different. We need to make changes in ourselves, not anybody else, not what you have to do, what I have to do. And that's the idea of Lifnim meshuras hadin. But you can't live a life beyond the scope of the letter of the law, meaning including the spirit of the law, without one important component. There can't be shikha. A Jew is a creature of memory. A Jew has to remember. We find that when Yosef HaTzadik gave the prophecy to the Sar HaMashkim, to the butler in Paro's court, he said, "Remember me to Paro." And the Torah says that the Sar HaMashkim didn't remember Yosef, v'yishkachehu, and he forgot him. And it's interesting that the Tomer Devorah, as we'll learn next term, speaks about this attribute that the Sitra Achra has of forgetfulness. He wants us to forget. As a matter of fact, the Torah tells us that any sins that we've done that we remember, Hashem will forget. And any sins that we forget, Hashem will judge us on and he'll remember. And this is exactly what we need to be careful of. This is exactly this idea of how the Sitra Achra works. He causes us to forget. Let's go back a second to Titan Emet LeAvraham, Chesed Titan Emet LeYaakov, the straight arrow, linear approach to life. The truth is, that's the midat hadin. That's the attribute of strict justice. And it can be for good, and it can be disastrous. We find that when Yaakov Avinu goes in to his father to receive the bracha that we say every Motzei Shabbat, Vayiten lecha ha'elokim mital hashamayim u'mishmanei ha'aretz. And he will give you, Hashem will give you, of the dew of the heaven and of the abundant places of the earth. Rashi says, notes something very interesting. It doesn't say, V'yitin lecha Hashem. It says, V'yitin lecha Elokim. That the Elokim refers to the midat hadin. Straightforward. You do something, you get a reward. We talked about this last time. In a world of simplicity, whatever you do, you get a complete response immediately. And that's exactly the beauty of the bracha from Yitzchak to Yaakov. That if you follow Hashem's ways, Vayiten v'yachsor v'yiten, Hashem will give over and over and over again brachas, blessings. We'll have all the abundance we need. V'nasati mataretzechem b'ito yoreh al malkosh. You'll get these incredible opportunities, not rewards, but it'll open things up so that we can serve him without having to worry about it. And that's what happens when we remember Hashem. What happens when we don't remember Hashem? Things are not so good. In the world of the midat hadin, in the world of Titan Emet LeYaakov, we find two important verses in Parshas Ekev. Ve'amarta bilavavecho, and you'll say in your heart, Koichi ve'atzum yadi li, asa li asachayil hazeh. It is because of the might and strength of my hands that I've been successful. It's because of my powerful army that I'm successful. The slogan in Hanukkah after the 1967 war was, Mi yimalel gvurot Yisrael. Who can foretell the might of Yisrael? Instead of, Mi yimalel gvuras Hashem. Who can foretell the might of Hashem? It was just like the generation of the flood, after the flood, the generation of the dispersion that Noah observed and said nothing about. There was tremendous love for each other. There was tremendous unity, but there wasn't Hashem. You can have unity all you want, but if Hashem isn't part of the picture, it's a scenario for disaster. And what does that lead to? Ram levavcha v'shachachta es Hashem. Your heart will become mighty, and you'll forget Hashem. And that's why exactly 50 years ago, Hashem had to remind us of what the source of our success is. Not pushing Hashem to the side or leaving Him in our homes or leaving Him in the shul, but including Him in every moment of our life. Not forgetting Him. And that brings us again to what we were talking about. How to be a chassid. Every Jew needs to be a chassid. A chassid doesn't forget Hashem for a moment. So as I said, there are 5 manifestations of what it means to be Lifnim meshuras hadin, to act above and beyond the call of duty, to do things that are kind and nice and please Hashem, and please people as well. We want to do things that are nice to people. So that's the first one. In the introduction to Tikkun Zohar, he brings another definition of what a chassid is. Ezu chassid hamischassed im kono. It's an extension of not forgetting Hashem, but it's more. A chassid is someone who looks at the actions that he's doing in this world, acts of kindness, not because he expects to get something in return, because of the law of reciprocity, but because by doing something kind, he's bringing more godliness into the world. I don't want to talk about anything or anyone who were the kodshim who passed away. It's not my job to talk about them or analyze them. And chas v'shalom, anyone should say that because of anything anyone did, that they became martyrs. Chas v'shalom. But I do need to remind myself, as I said, that whenever I do an act of kindness, I'm not just feeling good, but I'm doing something. I have to remind myself to remember that I'm doing something to bring Hashem into the picture, to make myself close to Hashem. The third definition of what makes someone a chassid and what it means to be lifnim meshuras hadin, to be above and beyond the call of duty, comes from a very famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. It talks about different characters. And it says, someone who says, Sheli shelcha, v'shelcha shelcha, is called a, come on, chassid, of course. You'd think he's a tippish, but he's a chassid. Because the reason is that we need to recognize, unlike pure capitalism, which is based on Darwinism, which is based on kfira, which is completely negating Hashem, we need to recognize that everything I have is a gift from Hashem in this world. Everything is from Hashem. And when I say Sheli Shelcha, I'm talking about my friend here, and I'm talking about Hashem also. What's mine is yours. And what's yours is yours. When I recognize that really everything I have in this world is just an illusion, it makes it so that I look much less seriously at guarding all my possessions. Hashem has given them to me just like Hashem gave Adam and Chava in Gan Eden to serve it and to work it. I have to serve and work what's given to me because I'm the steward of the possessions that I have. I can't be stupid. But I also can't be possessed and say, it's mine. like a little child in school would do. So that's the third definition of what a chassid is. A little bit different than black hats and coats, white shirts, tzitzis flying all over the place, living in Williamsburg and Mea Shearim, huh? But that's what a chassid is. The fourth definition comes from the Holy Kotzker Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotzk, who says that a chassid is someone mishe'eno odea ikar shtafel v'lo tafer ikel. A person has his priorities straight. He knows what's important to do and in what order it has to be done. Not just living life in a state of chaos. The Medrash tells us that when Avraham was on his way from Ur-Kasdim and then to Haran, and then he was in Syria, and then he came to Tzur in Lebanon, he saw that people, as the closer he came to Eretz Yisrael, the more organized people's lives were. People made the soil ready at the proper time. They planted seeds at the proper time. They watered at the proper time. They harvested at the proper time. Unlike the chaotic life of the existentialists who lived where he had grown up and where he lived, who lived for the moment and didn't live in an orderly world. So says the Kotzker, says the Holy Kotzker, we need to be thoughtful in all that we do. And this again falls into the line with what we spoke about of having memory, remembering what we're supposed to remember, knowing that what we remember, Hashem will forget and won't call us on. That's why it's so important to constantly look within, to review our deeds, to talk to Hashem like a good friend. By doing that, we'll remember everything and we'll refine ourselves, we'll make ourselves closer to Hashem. So that's the fourth definition of a chassid that I found. And the fifth comes from Rabbi Yisrael ben Rabbi Eliezer, the Holy Baal Shem Tov himself. The Mishnah says, Hevi dan es kol adam lekaf schus. A person needs to judge every person meritoriously. When you have a scale, there are two palms, and everything you do should be to view that person who you see something wrong with as really being okay. But the Baal Shem Tov goes one step further. And he tells us that if I see someone doing something wrong, you know why? You know why I'm seeing it? Why is Hashem making me uncomfortable and showing me this person who's doing a terrible avera? Why is it that I'm in a dirty place? Why is it that something that I don't want to be around is suddenly around me? What's the answer? Why do you think Hashem is doing this to me? Thoughts. Why do you think that Hashem is making me critical of another Jew or any person or making me uncomfortable?
It's something you did yourself.
It's very good. It's something you did yourself. Not only that, but the Baal Shem Tov says that what you're seeing is a movie of your own life. And the thing you're seeing that person doing, you've been guilty of doing on many occasions yourself. And you're on trial. And the way that you judge that person is how you're going to be judged for that sin you've done. And that's a chassid. A chassid says, look for the good points in every person, in every situation. try to help them. Go above and beyond the call of duty. And when we do that, we make ourselves vessels for change. And indeed, thinking about, you have a Gilgal here, thinking about what occurred over the last 3.5 days is truly remarkable. And the first thing we have to do is to sensitize ourselves. Be aware and be sensitive to who we are, where we are, and what's going on in the times in life that we live in. Again, the first step is to pour deep into your soul and remember everything that you've forgotten. Because whatever you've forgotten, as the Tomer Devorah has told us, I didn't tell you what he said, but he told us in the Midah of Malchus that where it says, V'ram levavecha v'shchachta es Hashem, he says that the shikha, the loss of memory that comes to us, and it came to the Saramashkim, was from a very specific klipa. It is because of a demonic force that's called shikha. And it wants us to forget. And it's a klipa, it's a superficial klipa. Because deep inside we really remember, we really know. But it takes work. So the first thing we need to do, dear brothers and sisters, as we view events that happened, is to not forget. Not forget Hashem. Just like in 1973, we had to be taught a lesson to not forget Hashem. It was a painful lesson. And we have to remember in our lives not to forget Hashem. Not to look at Eretz Yisrael as a place which devours its inhabitants, as the Meraglim said, Chas v'sholom. When we look inside and we refine ourselves, then terrible things will stop happening. And that's the first thing we can do. The second thing, besides remembering that we are all chassidim, and we all need to live Lifnim meshuras hadin, is that we live in Eretz Yisrael. We live in an extremely sensitive place. And I want to share with you a few reflections about how holy Eretz Yisrael is. 3 psukim. The first one is from Parshas Eikev. Hashem describes in Parshas Eikev Eretz Yisrael as Eretz Asher Hashem Elokecha Doresh Osa. It is a land that Hashem is always looking out for. Tamid Einei Hashem Elokecha Becho Meireshis Hashana Ad Achris Hashana. The eyes of Hashem are always on you, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. The Torah tells that specifically for us to know that there is no happenstance, no chance, no mikra. Remember, the letters mikra, chance, mem, kuf, resh, hey, are the same letters as rak me Hashem. This is only from Hashem everything that happened. So we need to not forget what we've done. We need to remember we're in Eretz Yisrael. Here's the second pasuk. It's in Parshas Achramos. What happens if we happen to forget that Hashem is watching us? Listen to what it says in the very end of Parshas Achramos. V'shamartem es chukoisai ve'es mishpatai. And you should keep all of my laws, whether they're logical or illogical, or whether they make sense or not. And And you shouldn't do all of the abominations. Asher asu anshei haaretz asher lifnechem. Shetimu haaretz. That were perpetrated by all the people who lived in Israel before you came there. V'lo yisaki haaretz eschem. Because what will happen if you act like all the Gentiles who lived here, all the 7 nations that lived in Israel before you came here? Then Hashem will cause the land to vomit you out. Kasher ka es hagoy asher lifnechem. As he vomited out the nations that were here beforehand. More is expected of us. I remember growing up, hearing David Ben-Gurion saying that we have to be like all other nations of the world, with our ganavim, with our thieves, and with our prostitutes. No, absolutely not. We are a holy nation. I'm not saying that you have to keep all the mitzvahs, but I am saying that if you live in Eretz Yisrael, refine yourself. Remember things that you've done yourself. And say to Hashem, I want to be close to you. Help me remember the things that I've forgotten. Help me to remember that I'm living in this holy land, that I'm not like anybody else, that I don't need to do drugs to get close to you, that I don't need to party away from you. I want to party with you, Hashem. I want to honor this holy land. And so what happens when we do? Ultimately, if you ever seen someone who does drugs, I'll never forget, when I was growing up in Los Angeles, I had a dear friend who asked me to come into his garage because he wanted to drop mescaline. He wanted to use the hallucinogenic drug, which is related to peyote. And for 2 minutes, he was hugging me, and he was very happy, and everything was beautiful. And for the next 20 hours, he was bouncing off the walls and screaming, help me, help me, help me, help me get down from this. I'm dying, I'm dying. And he would vomit, and he'd bounce off the walls, and he would fall asleep in his vomit. Because the only high which has any substance at all is a high that comes directly from Hashem, not using any substance at all. If you're going to party with the ecstasy, knowing that Hashem is there without using any other substance. That's simcha. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. Serve Hashem with genuine, unmitigated, unadulterated joy. And when you have simcha and you're thoughtful and you don't let go of yourself, but rather you connect yourself to Hashem, it brings us to the third pasuk I'm going to share with you today. And this pasuk comes from Ki Savoy. In Ki Savoy, we have a terrible list of things will happen if we forget about Hashem. And right in the middle of that, the Arizal HaKodesh says that this verse comes to tell us that any things that we do that are self-centered, that are egotistical, are just going to make us alone. We may feel a high temporarily, but as soon as it comes off, we're going to be lower than we ever were before. And the truth is, if you look at the rock and rollers from the 60s and 70s and 80s, how many of them committed suicide, had overdoses? Because they lived from one high to the next, because they didn't have a real high. And the only real high is Hashem. And so the Arizal HaKodesh says that this is the way that one gets close to Hashem, and one is able to totally have realization of Hashem and never forget Him. This is the pasuk in the middle of all of this disastrous prophecy. Tachas asher lo yavarta es Hashem elokecha b'simcha b'tuv levav merov kol. All these horrible things will happen to you because you didn't serve Hashem, your God, with joy. And what are the letters of besimcha? The same letters as machshava. Thinking. Not letting go of your mind. Not blowing your mind. Not emptying your mind. But connecting your mind with Hashem. And with a good-heartedness. Merov kol. Because Hashem has given me everything. Recognize that everything in my life comes from Hashem. So, that's what happens when we do connect to Hashem. And if we don't, then listen to what happens next. Lo yisa panim leziknai v'nar lo yachain. That what will happen is a nation will come from far away and they won't pay any attention to your elderly. And they won't have any mercy for your young ones. The cruelty will be unimaginable. Well, yes, we can imagine it now. So that's the second secret to what we can do ourselves. Number one, never forget Hashem. Be a chassid in all the ways we spoke about. Number two, never forget that we live in Eretz Israel. We live in this wonderful holy land, but it's very sensitive. And if we don't take care of ourselves and we forget about what we have to do here, even a little thing to change ourselves, to be close to Hashem, to be close, to appreciate where we live, to not throw a piece of gut. If you finish a bag of Cheetos, don't throw it in the ground. Put it into a garbage bin. If somebody else left something out, pick it up. Be kind to Eretz Yisrael so it doesn't vomit you out, chas v'shalom. But there's a third part that we also have to look to ourselves for. And that's time sensitivity. I don't think that it's by coincidence that the war in 1973 began on Yom Kippur. And I don't think it's by coincidence that the war this week began on Shabbat. It's interesting that, as I've told you before, in my practice, I have adduced 15 attributes, 15 principles of Jewish medicine. And principle number 7 is Shabbat. What does Shabbat have to do with medicine? And besides, if I'm treating Jews and non-Jews, which I do, if they come to me, I have some patients in Los Angeles that want to come. What does it have to do with them? We know that Goy Sheshavas Chayav Misa, that if a non-Jew decides to keep the 7th day of the week as a day of rest, they are guilty of death. No. Let's talk about ourselves first. When a Jew is sensitive to Shabbat, it's each of us where we are. It doesn't mean I need to learn all of the laws of Shabbat and keep them to the most finite detail. That would be lovely. But think about what you do Friday afternoon. Are you kind to people? When you're driving, do you cut someone off because you have to get home for Shabbos? Do you bring in a home where everything is clean, beautiful, in honor of the Shabbos queen? On Shabbos itself, Do you talk about weekday activities? Do you talk about how much money you made this week? Shabbos afternoon, do you say to yourself, I want to get ice cream Motzei Shabbos, therefore I'm not going to have basari in the afternoon? That's bringing Shabbos, the spirit of Shabbos, into our lives. If you don't keep Shabbat, then do one little thing that'll make a difference in your life, that'll please Hashem. Don't turn on the radio. Don't talk about business. Decide not to drive. One little thing will make such an impact on Hashem, a remarkable impact on Hashem, that it can bring the Mashiach, it can bring the Gula, it can make us worthy, because I myself am more worthy if I do that, if I didn't do it before. What about a non-Jew? So too. Not that he has to keep the seventh day, but no person is a machine. You look at kids today with their cell phones. They're addicted to their technology. We had a guest over on Shabbos a few months ago, and under the table she was texting her friends. It was addiction. Technology controls us. It swallows us up. Just like we said last week, the Sitra Achros not only works on forgetfulness, but he works on swallowing up our time. So if you're not Jewish and you're listening to this, choose a day, and on that day, free yourself from technology. Don't be a slave to technology. And you'll find that you'll become a healthier person. Your blood pressure will get better. Your heart will get better. Your sugar will get better. Your health will get better, and you'll live a longer life. So whatever you do, include Hashem in your life. Today is also the yahrzeit of three great tzaddikim. And those three great tzaddikim emulated and epitomized these three ways of connecting to Hashem, and these three ways of bringing Hashem closer to us. Remembering and being connected to Hashem in all we do. Remembering that we live in Eretz Yisrael. And remembering Hashem in the time that we spend so we don't disconnect in time. And I'll share with you some very short stories to illustrate and to elevate the memory of these three great tzaddikim, who all had their yahrzeit on the 25th of Tishrei. The first one is the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer was not only the leader of all of German Jews, but the impact of what he has given us lasts ad hayom hazeh, to today. They tell the story that a young man came to the Chassam Sofer and wanted to learn to receive smicha from him. And 3 times he had to leave the room and come back. And after the 3rd time, the Chassam Sofer told him, I can't teach you. You're not worthy to receive smicha from me. Why, Rebbe? Why? What did I do wrong? I noticed that when you left the room and when you came into the room, you didn't kiss the mezuzah. Sometimes when we go into a room, we haphazardly kiss our hand, our left hand, just touch it and leave. Don't make your actions mechanical. To be a Jew is to not be mechanical. When you daven, even when you walk on the street, even when you go into somebody's house, this is something that the Chassam Sofer was very sensitive to. The second tzaddik, who's Yortzeit today, the 25th of Kislev, of Tishrei, is Rav Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, the holy advocate on behalf of Israel. Two quick stories. When he first got married, he went into his father-in-law's shul, and he was immediately recognized as a child prodigy. He was 18, 19 years old, and they made him the Rav of the shul. And they asked him to begin on Yom Kippur Kol Nidre. I don't remember if it was Kol Nidre or Slichas, one or the other. And he goes up and he puts his tallis over his head and he stands there and says nothing. And he goes back to his seat. And this happens 3 or 4 times. And his father-in-law is humiliated. What kind of nutcase did my daughter marry? And he's boiling, but he's not saying anything. The 4th or 5th time he goes up, and he says to him, if you're such a chassid and a tzaddik, then you say Kol Nidre yourself. And he throws the towels down, and he goes to his chair. And everybody leaves, and everyone is shocked. And his father-in-law, who gave him to some degree the benefit of the doubt, asks him, my son-in-law, what did you just do? Are you normal? Is something wrong? Yes, my dear Shver. When I went into the tallis, I was told by my Yetzer Hara, I'm here too. I don't want you here. How could you not want me here? When you learned all the Torah you did, who was there with you? I didn't ask you to be there. Well, I was there. And when you did all these tremendous acts of kindness, who was there? I didn't ask you to be there. I was there. And so I threw the tallis down and I went back to my seat because I didn't want any part in arrogance. Because to be a Jew is to be tremendously humble, and that's the essence of the Tomer Devorah. As we're going to learn, the first midah, the first sphera of the 10 spheres is Keser. And Keser is ultimate humility. It's quintessential humility. And that's what it means to be a chassid. To have such tremendous humility that you think about someone else more than yourself. The second story, one day in Barditchev, the Rebbe Levi Yitzchak is going in the street, and he sees a wagon driver putting on his tefillin while he's greasing the axles of his wagon. And the wagon got very scared. The Rebbe's going to scream at me. How humiliating that I'm forgetting Hashem's commandments. We just said that you're forgetting. Said Rebbe Levi Yitzchak to him, I'm so proud of you. Even when you're concerned with earning a living, you're still thinking about Hashem. So that was the Meilitz Yashar of Yisrael. That was Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. And the third great tzaddik, whose Yortzeit was 26 years ago, was my Rebbe, Rab Davi Matisyahu of Biala, Bnei Brak. We don't have much time. I don't know if we have any time left. But the stories that I witnessed firsthand from him and how he gave to people unselfishly were remarkable. And so I'll tell you a very quick story about him. He came to my daughter Chavi's, my stepdaughter Chavi's chasana, her wedding. And it happened to be Parshas Pinchas. And the Rebbe asked the question. We know that there is no reward for mitzvahs in this world. And yet Pinchas received 2 rewards. He was made a Kohen where he wasn't before, and he lived eternally because Pinchas became Eliyahu. How could that be? And the Rebbe answered, there is no reward for mitzvahs in this world, but there is reward for meshuras nefesh, for giving of oneself to another, for being unselfish. And that's what we need to do. We need to sanctify ourselves, time, and space, just like these tzaddikim do. In however way we can do it, in however small way we can change ourselves, make ourselves better, make ourselves more connected to Hashem, and then we'll be able to experience what we experienced this morning. 2 mornings ago, I didn't sleep because there was planes traveling over nonstop. Last night I thought it was again. But Hashem was sending us his bombers. He was sending us Gishmei Bracha. There was thunder and lightning coming from Hashem to validate the beauty of all that our wonderful soldiers of Hashem are doing. And may we all celebrate quickly the redemption, and may we all quickly feel the sweetness of Hashem together with Mashiach.
So we're now